sponsors from the United States are watching, and they were not prepared for this. The biggest tennis sponsors are trying to respond after a teenage Filipino completely smashed all predictions. Alex Eala wasn't supposed to be there. This type of attention wasn't intended for her. But one game changed everything in a world where Western narratives control sports and endorsements for millions of dollars. The question is not whether they are no longer paying attention, it's whether they're ready for what comes next. The conversation never included Alex Eala. Not in the boardrooms of Manhattan, not at the Nike headquarters office during strategy meetings, not in the upscale tennis magazines that predicted the next wave of superstars. Her name was whispered in specialist groups, a talent acknowledged by those who concentrated on younger circuits, but it is not particularly visible to the machine that decides which professional tennis players are showcased. Eala was born in Manila and raised in a country with few tennis courts and a strong basketball culture, so her journey would never be easy. There has never been a singles Grand Slam champion from the Philippines. Infrastructure was lacking. There was no money, the path that European players and Americans take for granted. Elite academies, commercial sponsorships from 12 years old, media attention that boosts mythology. It didn't exist for her. But Eala had a different notion. She trained with the best in Europe at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain. Some members of her family were religious, while others weren't. Additionally, she competed in the 2022 U.S. Open Junior Championship, which should have served as a warning to everyone listening. It wasn't only that she was successful, it was also how she prevailed. The courage, the composure, the ability to stop games when the pressure was too much. But the tennis business changed. The usual suspects were chased by sponsors. Potential candidates from Eastern Europe with well-known last names include tall, powerful Americans who employ Instagram followings. For decades, the blueprint for advertising remained unaltered. Before she ever gets a major, you choose a young, white player, ideally blonde and American, and you build a brand around her. It is predictable. It's safe. It generates revenue. Eala wasn't a good fit the mold. She was little, from a Southeast Asian market that was hardly acknowledged by tennis executives. It was believed that she would be a dependable professional who may rank in the top 50, win a few little championships, be respectable but unmarketable, and not be able to make a significant difference that their assumption would cost them anything. Everything. Due to the fact that American sponsors did not pay attention, something was evolving. Eala's games were used to determine how many Filipino viewers competed with primetime television. Social media mentions of her were increasing, not just in Manila, but also in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. The possibility that one of their own may compete at the highest level was rousing the whole region. And then there was the game that changed everything. But you need to understand the hazards before we get there, due to the fact that several people took part. $1 billion are involved in this enterprise. Recognizing that it had been ignoring half of the world, it was a second round. A WTA 500 match? It shouldn't have mattered on paper. Dealing with a former player in the top 20 who was expected to win in a straight set, Eala was not in the top 100. An outdoor court was used for the game. There isn't much television coverage in the US, and it's not prime time. But something unexpected happened. In a tiebreaker, Eala won first place. Then she broke serve early in the second. Furthermore, as the competition progressed and she withstood breakpoints and blasted winners who separated from her opponents, they were shocked. But something else was happening thousands of miles away. In Manila, bars were packed. Parties for observation started. Social media became popular. Unexpectedly, more than 200,000 fans watched the official WTA broadcast in real time during early round matches, which typically drew a few thousand spectators. In this paragraph, comments in Tagalog and English were unclear. There are emojis and Filipino flags everywhere. Eala won the match in 2 sets. Her celebration was caught on camera. Nothing unusual, just a clenched hand and a composed, resolute look. But at that moment, she became more than just a tennis player. She became a symbol. The highlights gained popularity on Twitter within hours. Videos of her backhand triumphs on TikTok went viral. Superstars from the Philippines who had never tweeted about tennis suddenly started posting about Eala. The president's office in the Philippines released a statement. There was more than just sports news. This was a sense of national pride. In the US, people started asking questions at the headquarters of the biggest sports marketing firms in the world. Who is this girl? Why do Southeast Asian views outnumber those of a couple of the top 10 players? Why were we unaware of this? Panic did not exist first. In private, there was a seismic event, but there were also a few calls and emails to agents. Marketing executives were collecting data. Social media teams were looking at engagement rates. Brand managers were looking at the demographic information they had long ignored. The numbers were amazing. There are more than 100 million people in the Philippines alone. More than 600 million people live in Southeast Asia, where tennis viewership has been steadily growing. However, up until now, no one had tried to develop a star capable of doing so. According to one source and sponsor, it was an important item of athletic apparel known as an emergency gathering. On the table was a simple question: how could we have missed this? Because Eala wasn't just drawing attention to herself. She was illustrating the type of concentration that aligns with market expansion, sales, and brand loyalty. Nike leveraged Serena's concentration to create an empire. Williams. The type of dedication that made Naomi Osaka one of the highest paid athletes in the world, and they had ignored her. The combat itself had only begun, but the game was finished. This is when things get nasty, because intentions might be questioned when money moves swiftly. And Alex Eala found herself in the midst of a disagreement that she had not asked for. In less than 72 hours, the murmuring started. According to sources, at least 3 well-known businesses have been in touch with Eala's management group. They haven't made any formal offers yet, but they have asked questions and looked at the situation. Nike, which was well known for rejecting Eala 2 years before, was reportedly reassessing. Wilson, who already sponsors her racket, became interested in expanding the partnership. 5 of them were circling, including Gatorade, Rolex, and even upscale businesses that seldom touch tennis unless you're at the top. But there were issues with the recruiting process. There was a rush. The tone of the conversations occurring behind closed doors was shown by internal messages that were leaked from one brand, never formally validated but widely reported. Marketing teams were being pushed to explain why they hadn't noticed Eala sooner. Data analysts were tasked with estimating her market value in Southeast Asia. Contract agreements were being examined by legal teams. It was able to move swiftly. A senior marketing director's remarks in an email summed up the mood. "We can't afford to be late again." The reference was clear: Naomi Osaka. Osaka wasn't given first consideration for sponsorship even after winning the 2018 US Open. She made some bargains, but not quite as many as she deserved. Brands didn't recognize what they had for months: a bilingual, mixed-race star who could dominate both the Japanese and American marketplaces. Her asking price had skyrocketed when they moved. The sector was terrified to repeat the experience with Eala since they had learnt the lesson the hard way. But there was a problem. At least, not just yet. Eala's team had no intention of participating in a bidding war. They wanted something more important than a money grab. They wanted to work together in a way that respected her identity, her story, and her connection to the Philippines. They didn't want her to serve as a diversity checkbox. They wanted her to stand for anything real. That's when the tension began. Because of all the excitement, there was a sudden curiosity and distrust penetrating the debate on social media. Unpleasant questions started to come from fans. Why now? Why didn't brands care when she won junior titles? When she was struggling in the qualifying rounds without any help, why did they show no concern? The phrase diversity play started to appear in the comment sections. Critics accused sponsors of being opportunistic, of adopting a fad without making a significant commitment. Some noted that Eala's sudden entrance only occurred when she shown her capacity to generate revenue, which was used to determine how valuable she was to viewers rather than her potential or skill. Others defended the labels. This is how companies are run. Sponsors invest money where it will pay off, notwithstanding their disagreements. Eala's achievement created opportunity. It's not exploitation. That's capitalism. Alex Eala remained silent throughout the heated dispute, but her team didn't. It became clear from what they stated afterward that this was more than simply suggestions. This was a matter of power. Who gets to decide where it will go? A statement was released by Eala's management. It was well-written and professional, but the message was obvious. She has always been the focus of Alex's attention on the game, not for publicity. We are grateful for the support she is receiving, but we are also aware of partnerships that align with the values of her community. Making money off of a moment is not the goal here. It has to do with building something sustainable. It was an attempt above the boo. It reminded Eala's group that the game had been played. They knew that she had piqued the interest of more than just the sponsors. They refused to let her be used because they were fascinated by the market she represented. But the criticism continued. If anything, it intensified. On the one hand, you had supporters who stood up for Eala. They saw her as an example of minority athletes finally getting recognition. They did not want her story to become a commodity. She was reduced to a business strategy because they refused. 2. Industry was on the other side of you. Specialists who said that this answer lacked knowledge. Sports are a commercial endeavor. They said that it has always existed. Is it not a good thing if Eala's rise opens doors for other Southeast Asian athletes and forces sponsors to invest in regions they had previously ignored? Isn't that progress? The conversation had an impact on opinion pieces, podcasts, and thought pieces. A few writers praised Eala for keeping her cool. Since you may leave money on the table, others criticized her group for being too cautious. Some said that the whole conversation was theatrical, and that although everyone was talking about fairness and representation, no one was really changing the procedures that led to the initial problem. A former player in the top 10 then shared their thoughts. She said in an interview that, "I think it's fantastic that Alex is getting recognition, but to be honest, she would have made same deals if she had a different appearance or were from a different country several years ago. The fact that sponsors are now that you're only interested, you have to know about this sport." The statement went viral. It was presented as unity, but it also rekindled the most unpleasant aspect of the dialogue. Tennis has consistently enjoyed the issue of diversity, and spending money on it cannot be fixed by a single breakthrough player. Eala had yet to make a public statement, although those close to her remarked in private that she was worn out by the commotion. She didn't want to serve as a symbol. She was unwilling to serve as a case study. All she wanted was to play tennis. However, the world was not going to allow her because her achievements had revealed a weakness in the sector. And right now, everyone, including media, sponsors, supporters, and other players, have to choose a side. However, this is what no one was discussing about yet. The actual change wasn't simply taking place in boardrooms, it was taking place on the ground. Additionally, it was larger than anybody had anticipated. Although the online discussions heated, something more subdued, however, something more important was taking place. In the Philippines, tennis clubs were reporting record enrollment. Children who were signing without ever touching a racket, ready to learn. Eala's games were being shown at educational institutions. Her expression was on billboards. However, it wasn't just the Philippines. Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and around Southeast Asia, tennis was now apparent in a manner that had never been before. Additionally, sponsors were at last focusing on the facts they had disregarded for years. The Asia-Pacific area is one of the sports markets with the strongest growth in the whole planet. Table tennis and badminton have always been in charge, but tennis has been gaining ground gradually. The issue was that Western companies never bothered to create stars capable of establishing a connection with that audience. They believed that supporters in Asia would just adhere to whomever emerged victorious. They didn't consider representation was important. Eala demonstrated they are mistaken. Naomi Osaka comparisons were unavoidable. Osaka's influence on tennis in Japan was seismic. She didn't just motivate a generation, she significantly altered the way the sport was sold in Japan. Sponsors are aware that visibility is important, that seeing someone who has your appearance, who talks your language, who embodies your culture, that establishes a relationship, no amount of advertising is replicable. Eala was applying the same principle to Southeast Asia. However, the stakes were significantly greater since, in contrast to Japan, which had tennis before corporate investment and infrastructure, Southeast Asia remained mostly unexplored. There was more than one nation's potential. It was a whole area, and American sponsors at last were realizing what it implied. Nike had ruled the Asian market for many years, although mostly via soccer and basketball. Tennis was an afterthought. Internal projections now said that signing Eala may lead to doors to collaborations, retail growth, and brand fidelity that would be beneficial for years. Wilson could already see it. Eala's racket model sales in the Philippines had tripled. Her clothing, despite its modesty, the range was selling out, and she has yet to win a WTA championship. According to one sports marketing expert, to put it plainly, if Eala wins a Grand Slam, she is more than simply a famous tennis player, a cultural phenomenon, and the business that will be in charge of her early lockdown market for a generation. The financial stakes were high, but so were the cultural ones. For example, the first athletes from Southeast Asia weren't just asking for advice, they were demanding it. Local juniors were speaking out, asking why they didn't have the same opportunities for progress as those in Europe. Federations put pressure on the WTA to organize more tournaments around Asia. Broadcasters came under fire from supporters for not airing games featuring Western celebrities. Eala didn't start this trend, but she came to embody it, and whether or not she desired the role, it was hers. What will happen next? That's the question that everyone is asking, and the answer might change tennis forever. Speculation is a constant. Will Eala sign a large contract? Will she hold off till a partnership meets her needs? Will she become the face of a global campaign, or will she choose a more reserved approach, focusing on the game rather than the spotlight? Although her organization has remained silent, insiders close to her assert that negotiations are still ongoing. Numerous brands are involved. The offers are significant in terms of artistic authority as well as financial value. Several sponsors are reportedly willing to let Eala lead the initiatives in order to ensure that they represent her values and her community. That would be unprecedented. Eala isn't your typical athlete, but athletes of her level don't usually get this type of power. The brands know that she represents something more than herself. There's also talk of Eala starting her own charity focused on improving tennis in Southeast Asia. If that happens, the balance of power might be drastically altered. She would be making investments in the neighborhood instead of waiting for sponsors. The infrastructure herself, providing pathways for the next generation, and ensuring that the kids who saw her don't have to participate in the same disputes that she did. All of this, however, bears some risk. There is a great deal of stress. We now look at each game. Every loss is investigated. It is expected that she will keep winning, keep rising, and keep the focus. What happens if the enthusiasm fades if she doesn't, if she had a bad season, or if injuries make her depressed? That's the hard reality of sports. Potential does not guarantee success, and the same sector recognizing her may as well go on to the next story. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the notion is that the conversation has already changed because of Eala's rise. She has already forced sponsors to change their strategies. She has already had an impact on thousands of kids. They didn't think of tennis as their sport. No contract is capable of doing that. Take it out. Because whether or not she goes on to win the Grand Slam, Alex Eala has already achieved an incredible achievement if she gets the biggest deal in tennis history. She has revealed the invisible, made the seemingly impossible look doable. That's innovative in a sport that has ignored whole regions for far too long. The real question is this just the beginning of Alex Eala's story? Or is this the beginning of a shift that will revolutionize tennis for the next generation? Alex Eala only wants to play. She has no plans to change the business, tennis, but her rise has exposed the inequalities, biases, and missed chances that have long plagued this sport. Because the world is watching and the globe is bigger than Chump. They had imagined American sponsors are reacting not out of kindness, but out of need. What happens next is up to you. But one thing is certain, Eala. Tennis will never again see Southeast Asia in the same way. If you were moved by this story, think about what it made you feel. The most memorable tennis moments aren't always on the court, so click the subscribe button. Our goal is to educate you. Leave a comment on those articles. Do you think sponsors are really making a difference? Is this just business, Eala? Let's have a conversation.